Savage.
Hello, savages. Welcome back to another episode of the Savage Snowflake podcast with me, Jeff Leach, your friend, your orator, your dictator, your calm enthusiast, your girlfriend and boyfriend, and potentially just a close friend who comes over and kind of fancies you but never really does anything about it. Just sits in the background, watches you from afar, thinking, what could have been if only I was a bit more honest about my feelings. I'm that guy to you. Thanks very much for tuning in for another episode. We are on a landmark episode. It's episode 100 of the podcast. So thank you very much for sticking with me. Those of you on Patreon, I appreciate all of the support. If you're not yet doing that, you can donate as little as $1 a month to help this podcast continue to bring you great comedians, great creators, great musicians, great producers and directors, and of course, the occasional porn actor, to digest some of their thoughts, some of their feelings, and learn a little bit more about ourselves and the world. You can do that at patreon.com/savagesnowflake. Thank you very much. And today, joining me is a gentleman who I've been watching with quite a lot of interest, enjoyment, and also a level of admiration and respect on YouTube. He's a content creator who does commentary videos about social pop culture icons, politics in its first inception of the channel, and everything in between. It's The Right Opinion, aka James. Hi, James.
Hey, so you don't know me for my porn acting?
I don't, not yet. Not yet.
Oh,
I haven't
what?
found that deep dive Reddit thread yet.
Oh, fuck's sake.
Well, I know you'd love to be known as the prolific porn actor you are, but unfortunately, if you don't upload the footage to any kind of a public server, there's only so much digging I can do into your iCloud to find those files.
Fair enough. Well, I'll try and make it more accessible next time.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thanks very much for coming and saying hello. I know that you're a young, busy individual.
Yeah.
I assume you might be studying at this point in your life. You seem
Well-
to be of around that age, but you're very elusive, obviously, with your online persona versus the real person that is James.
Yes, well, I actually completed university at the end of last year, which was a typical 3-year course. It wasn't done in the most conventional fashions.
What did you
given
study?
my chaotic nature. I did a social science liberal arts degree, but it was a conglomerate of politics, philosophy, international law, and psychology. So it was
Jack of all
interesting
trades.
that's exactly how I would class it. I wanted to keep my options open, so I decided to do a bit of a venture into everything. Originally, it was just called a PPIL, which is Politics, Philosophy, and International Law, but then I wanted to do a bit of psychology too. So in the end, they were just like, well, we don't have a name for this, so we'll just call it social science, and you sod off and do that.
There you go. Well, at least you did it, right?
Exactly, I did it, and I completed it.
And how much is that degree serving you now in your future life and your future endeavors?
Absolutely none, in no way whatsoever.
Yeah,
in
same,
no way whatsoever
same.
is it.
I did 3 years at Warwick University. I did an English Literature and Theatre Studies degree, and it was very much one of those, get something to fall back on, Jeff. You know, if the acting and the TV doesn't work out, get something to fall back on.
Exactly that. That's
yeah.
how I approached it. And in all honesty, I did actually kind of want to go into politics, philosophy after university, but I just looked at the political environment and was like, well, actually, probably not the best idea right now. It's an absolute mess. I'll just focus on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'll get back to this later. I've got plenty of time.
More fun to pick people apart on the internet instead, right?
Exactly. Much more fun to bully people online.
Well, now, I mean, there are plenty of bullies online. There are plenty of people who make
Yeah.
content that I do think is very much focused on, I obviously someone like, the gnome himself, Keemstar, would be an example of someone who loves just laying into people. Whereas this is one of the reasons that I think, certainly for myself, I can only speak from a subjective point of view, but I think a lot of your viewers, I would assume, enjoy watching your content because you do seem to take quite a balanced approach to every single one of the subject matters that you decide to make a video on.
Yeah, I definitely try and be a bit nicer than the average commentator. And I think generally a lot of audiences appreciate that, particularly people who may have some sympathies with that commentator. They don't want to just see them torn apart because they may know a different side of that commentator rather than just a singular situation, which may show one of their worst sides. So for me, generally, it's about, okay, they've done this thing wrong. How bad is it in the grand scheme of things? What can they take forward from this? Should they continue to be that sort of personal line, or is it something a bit more serious? And I think I can typically draw a border between the people who've done stuff that, there's a
Yeah, like
little less than
predators on TikTok trying to fuck little kids versus
exactly.
Daniel Brigoli, saying some pretty pretty offensive stuff on a Snapchat. There's a bit of a difference, isn't there?
Exactly. There's a difference, and I try and outline that. I feel like if you go into melodramatic, you kind of lose the borders for those sorts of things. So for me, it was important to have that line and have some sort of barometer, which, although I don't obviously explicitly lay out, I
Sure.
do kind of want to communicate as an unspoken rule on my channel. Just have a idea of where a person may lie on my own subjective moral compass.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned morality because I think that you mentioned in one of your videos actually dealing with Ethan and Hila. They took a bit of a break, H3, and
Yeah.
when you were commenting on that. That particular instance in their life and their journey on YouTube as creators, one of the things you mentioned was these people are so well liked and their content has been so well received by the YouTube community, really because they do seem to inject a little bit of morality even into videos that are, ostensibly a takedown of someone who's acted like a complete moron on the internet,
Yeah.
more often than not.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is a focus for you when you're making your videos.
Yeah, definitely. I like to have an idea of where I would place someone personally on my own moral compass and the reasons and justifications for reaching that conclusion. A lot of people like my content because I present a lot of information. There are a lot of creators who do that too, to be fair. There are a lot of creators who do these really strong video essays with a lot of deep dives.
Hmm.
I try and do that, but I also try and have an element of my opinion too and the justifications for it. It's all very well and good presenting information, and for many channels, it is more than enough. For me, I want to kind of integrate that with my opinion too, so people can see my own reasoning and maybe see their own opinion too as well, or maybe have a different opinion, something that I think is completely acceptable as well.
Yeah. How many responses do you get from the particular creator or the artist or the absolute twat who happened to do something stupid on the internet that you've chosen as the subject matter of the latest video? How many of those people reach out to you and say, "Hey, listen, I watched the video and I took something away from it other than just, the view count about me"?
Yeah, to be fair, a decent number of people have responded somewhat positively to the videos that I have published on them. I obviously do not know exactly who's seen my videos and exactly what they may have thought, but I've had a few instances. Boogie, I know he took my video fairly well. Jack, mate, we had a good discussion too. I can't remember too many people taking it negatively, really. Um, and some people who've been included or mentioned have responded as well. So it's a bit of a uncertainty to an extent,
Yeah.
but I know generally I think my videos are less despised by the subjects in hand.
Well, yeah, because you're not categorically just going, "Hey, isn't this person an absolute cunt? And this is why I hate them, etc., etc." You'd like to at least say, "Well, look, here's potentially the reasons why someone might do this." I mean, one of the more recent videos, or one of the videos that I watched of yours more recently, actually, I should say, because the playlist and the algorithm seem to just jump you from year to year to month,
Oh yes.
was the one about the Cash Me Outside. Well, Daniel Bagroli, but it was actually more so about the her oh god, now I'm blanking myself. Her counterpart, the
Whoa,
who is
Vicky.
whoa Vicky, thank you so much. Who's in,
No problem.
which actually the irony of that whole video as well is I was watching this thinking, whilst I think both of these young ladies are products of obviously social media hype, aggrandizing, abhorrent, reality TV-esque bullshit kind of status. Just going on TV and saying something outlandish and stupid shouldn't afford you a platform, a career, and a monthly wage. But unfortunately, in this day and age, it does. But I was watching. I was thinking, well, it was very balanced from both sides. You were taking into account what these people might have been thinking, but beyond that, also what their friends might have been thinking in allowing them to do these things, what their parents should really have done in the situation. You do look at the outside world that affects predominantly, let's say, younger people going onto the internet or onto TV and saying stuff that ultimately lands them in trouble later on down the line.
Exactly. One of the things that I've noticed about the internet a lot, and I say this to friends, I say this to younger creators who message me for advice, I say you got to be careful online, because when I was 16, 17, I barely spent any time online. I
5
don't
years
really,
ago, 5 years ago, James.
five years ago,
That's so
5 years
painful
ago.
for me. But
It's 5 years ago for me, and um
God, 14
I
years ago for me.
oh gosh, and I can't really remember too much about the stuff that I did or the stuff that I said, and to be honest, I wouldn't expect to. I know that I did some stuff that I definitely would never consider doing today.
Absolutely,
And I
yeah,
think
the same.
that's really important, and it's an important part of personal growth.
The difference is
But
you
the
can't
different,
pull up the chat log of a Nokia 9210. Whereas,
it,
you go into your
I
Instagram
mean,
and people go, look at this message.
it's not even things like that. It's the things like real life and all that shit.
Right.
And I say to people who are going down this road, who are online, there's one guy
So you're talking
who's
about
who
content creators specifically, people who want to make
content.
their career in
Yeah,
uploading content about themselves or their opinions on stuff to the internet.
exactly. And I'm
Okay.
saying to them, I'm saying you got to remember that this stuff can be archived, this stuff can be remembered. And although I would always defend you if in like 5, 6 years time people try and you know end your career for it,
Hmm.
within reason, of course.
Sure.
Depends what you do, but within reason, I will likely defend you because I know that a lot of people do stupid stuff at that age, and people always have done.
Hmm.
I will
People do
say,
stupid
be
stuff,
careful.
a decade later or 2 decades later, or God forbid. I mean, look at the current political. You mentioned the political situations we
Yeah.
have in both the UK and I live in the US now, and I mean that's a complete fucking farce. These are meant to be some of the
Oh,
brightest, most eloquent minds on the planet, and yet they're constantly saying stupid fucking shit every day. It's very
oh,
frustrating.
some of them clearly haven't grown up at all. But the issue is, it's just this sort of stepping away out of being unknown into being known seems to be the hardest transition, because I've applied for a few game shows in my time because I'm a big game show fanatic,
Now
and
this
one of
is
the
to
game
take
shows
take part as
as a
a contestant,
contestant.
right?
And one of the game shows that I've applied to is the British Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is currently hosted by Jeremy Clarkson.
Right.
And in the questionnaire, like for signing up, they say, is there anything that we should be aware of that may reflect badly on our corporate image?
Hmm.
And I was just thinking to myself, you've got Jeremy Clarkson hosting your show, someone who's probably got like multiple more controversies than any of the contestants combined.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
don't I don't mind at all. It doesn't really I don't really care. But the fact is that these people, um the media are focused on revelations and what
Hmm.
they can find out about someone. And therefore, when someone says to me, I'm doing this, that, and that, I'm saying, well, think ahead. If you get to the stage of being known, what are people going to find out about you? Because there are plenty of people, plenty of famous people who've done stupid shit once they're known, and because they're already known, people are just like, oh, fuck it.
Well, it's become even
And
worse now that I think. Look, I'm speaking now as someone who's had a career on television and in film for just over a decade now. But even when I used to host TV shows in England, like Big Brother's Big Mouth and Little Brother and things like that, ostensibly I was making commentary on a bunch of fucking morons in a house and picking them apart in the same way, a similar way, should we say, that you will dive in on, certainly with a less depth, because you only have a 22-minute format. But I only had a 22-minute format. But we were picking apart these seemingly just not the most intelligent, but seemingly well-spirited, well-intentioned people who are given a little fame and a little fortune. And it's amazing how that can instantaneously bring out the worst in people as well.
oh, without a doubt. And it's one of the things that I've really had to be careful about, because for my commentary, especially, it's a necessary part that I have to somehow remain grounded in the audience sentiment that drives a lot of these phenomena.
Right.
And I felt a lot of the time, particularly larger creators, people that I know, even my peers, that what's happened is they've got a bit of traction and they've lost grip of that audience sentiment, and they've done something that they inevitably regret.
Sure.
And I've done stuff that I regret
You just haven't uploaded
without
it
a
to
doubt.
the internet. That's the difference.
Well, that's I mean, I've done stuff. I've done videos that I think actually, no, that was a poor video. I could have done that better. I could have done this better. I have that. No question at all. But at the same time, I'm I have I have a good grip on how I should come to terms with the mistakes that I've made, and how I should express my feelings regarding them. Because I think the problem for many people is that when when they make those mistakes and people get called out for them, and I'm covering this in a future video,
Right.
um they they almost people almost feel insulted because they think about everything good they've done, and then they're like, well, I've done all these good things, how can people just call me out for the bad things?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that is an outcome of the media, and it's really important to not allow that feeling of anger that may come from the sentiment of unfair treatment to overwhelm you and cause you to take a try and hit back at probably upset audiences who probably upset for a legitimate reason. You have to acknowledge those mistakes with some level of humanity, because
Sure.
if you only focus on your own victimhood at that point, then you are equally only focusing on the negative.
Right. Yep.
And you can't allow yourself to do that. You have to approach everything with some greater perspective. And I think one of the biggest problems with fame is that it can narrow perspective, and it can distance yourself from why people may be upset or annoyed. And you don't have to necessarily agree with why people may be upset or annoyed, but the
Mm-hmm.
first step to really being able to help them empathize with you is empathizing with them. Because one of the things that I've always found is that sentiments, general sentiments felt by many people, don't just appear out of nowhere for
Absolutely.
no justified reason.
But they can
And
be created. I think. I mean, I'm going to cite a personal experience in a moment.
of course,
But they can be created by misleading content creators, people who
yes,
like to take snapshots out of context. I mean,
yes.
the example I was going to give is, for myself personally, I would like to think at the ripe old age of 35 years of age, and given the number of things that I've done over the course of my career, I should really, by now, have a very clear understanding of what you should and shouldn't say, the things you should and shouldn't do. However, if you're a creator who's multifaceted in any way, if you pick one lane, I think it's almost easier this day and age to be a single-minded idiot than it is to be a multifaceted, intelligent human being. Because if you're a single-minded idiot, you can actually barrel down one path. You can be that one thing for people, whether that is, whether you're the prankster or the offensive wannabe rap star or the whatever it happens to be. You can be that one thing, and if people try to call you out for that thing, it's very easy to sit back and say, well, this is what I am, and this is what I create, and this is what I do, and if you don't like it, you can fuck off. And if you do like it, stick around and enjoy the content. And I actually almost envy people who are that blindly single-minded sometimes.
I agree there without trying to stroke egos at all.
Sure.
Being able to see many sides of the issue is sometimes like quite a burden, and you're completely right in the fact that there is something, it's very, watching some people extremely simple-minded and just being able to do one thing and not give a shit. It is in a way, it's completely enviable, and they might be a lot happier for it.
Yeah.
But for me,
well, I've seen plenty of very happy, stupid people out there. And normally, the friends that I like to keep, and the company I like to keep, and the creators I like to mix with, I would like to think are intelligent and able people who can see the world, have that self-awareness, which I think is also an inherently British trait. That's another reason. I was going to ask you how much of your success, because you've been creating videos for 3 years now, going on 3 years. Some of those first videos still have, sort of 1 to 10,000 views. And then as you start to look at the more recent videos over the last year, we're talking in excess of 500,000 to 1 million views on the videos. How much of that success do you think is because of the Anglophilic nature of American audiences or Western audiences?
Well, it's very interesting you ask that, because I think around 50% of my audience is American.
Yeah.
And that is high for me in comparison to many of my friends. Actually, it's similar for a lot of my American friends. They tend to hit around 45, 50. I know some friends are on 60. For some individuals, particularly my friends like James Marriott, Willany, Memeless, they have a much more British audience. But I don't think that's just because of their style being different. It's also because I think of the topics they choose.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I pick mostly quite American-leaning topics.
Oh, absolutely.
There are some topics that I picked which lean a bit more British, and I've noticed that on those videos I've received more views from British audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be such as my Jackmate video, very British focused, very British oriented. I know at the time when that was picking up views, a large majority of those came from British audiences. So I think
the Americans do love a British accent. They do love, especially with the brand that you've created, which is this very self-deprecating, but also, you're a young man. You're what, 21 years of age?
22.
22 years of age. So still, without sounding too patronizing, still a young man with a lot to experience in the world. And I love that almost the character you've created is a little pompous, a little. I know it's tongue in cheek. That even the naming of the channel and your character, The Right Opinion, is you sort of outline that in your About Me section. The Right Opinion, it's a joke. I'm saying that, of course my opinion is the right opinion because it's my personal subjective one. It's you're mocking yourself there and self-deprecating. But I do think when it comes to, and I'm saying this now as a performer who's lived in America for 4 years, American audiences want British people to be one of two things. We're either Hugh Grant, and we're it's very posh and very very RP and slightly pompous, but also a little bit self-deprecating. And I'm not really that great, but let me tell you why everyone else is terrible too. Or they want us to be a Guy Ritchie character, so a Vinnie Jones and like, what mate, I'm a fucking lad. That's about the only two things you can do in America as a Brit.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I definitely have a bit of finesse to my style. I think that's come over time and experience.
Was that a
I
conscious decision to say, okay, I'm going to enhance these elements of
I
myself or
don't know. I
exaggerate?
never really thought about it too much, admittedly. I think it was just one of those things that eventually came as an outcome for what I was doing,
Okay.
and it
It
just
lends
got
itself to maybe to the content a
it
little bit.
does. It does, and it works, and and people enjoy it, and I can't really ask for anything else. So if I can make content that people can enjoy, then I consider that general benefit. My persona is pretty natural in many ways. I've always been quite pedantic. I've always been quite specific, and I've definitely got an element of paranoia that lends itself to the sort of analysis that I do. So for me, the persona fits my general personality, although obviously some elements are exaggerated.
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't a conscious creation of that I guess that personality or those personality traits. It was more a case of this is who I am, and actually by the way that you approach creating each of those videos, it's going to naturally lend itself to enhancing those various traits of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you mentioned paranoia there, and I know that you have dealt with on your channel, at least in one video that I watched, with mental health. You did a kind of life advice and mental
Yes.
health chat with a couple of your friends and answering some questions from viewers and from fans.
Mm.
Is that something that's there's a broader interest there for you in that world, or is this a personal thing? I ask because this podcast has served me to talk quite openly about depression,
Mm.
um,
Yes.
and even alcoholism. So I wonder whether that's something that you would expand on at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I think that
How mental are you,
generally
James?
I'm pretty mental, to be fair.
Okay, cool.
And and yes, that sort of those streams were definitely quite a personal thing.
Hmm.
My mental health is a bit all over the place. I'm never really sure how exactly I feel. And to be honest, I think that is partly due to YouTube and how it sets itself up. For me, it's a lot of pressure to get these opinions and to get the research right and make sure that I actually feel that way. I think
Hmm.
one of the biggest problems with making these journalism style analyses, probably in more depth than many actual pieces that you'd read in the news, is the fact that I am forming my opinion off the information based and trying to separate myself from any predisposed bias. But in doing that, it can leave me a bit distant as a person. And it will also lead me to the problem that I have sometimes questioning whether these opinions are actually my own and it's how I feel. And I think sometimes with the biggest problem, particularly mentally for me, as that creator, is that I'm no longer sure if what I think is what I feel and how much of that should be factored into either. And so it becomes a bit of an issue that I sometimes just don't feel enough with a
Are
lot
you
with
are
a
you
lot of
trying
things.
to reveal to me that you're a sociopath and you you have no envy
I'm
for human
I'm
life?
that's the thing. I'm very empathetic,
Okay.
particularly with situations in the moment, and I think that allows me to make the content that I make.
Mm.
But I also have the problem of probably also trying to take the position um quite seriously, understandably so, because there is a lot of competition in commentary, and
Absolutely, yeah.
therefore I have to take what I do very seriously. But in doing that, sometimes, I can become very distant mentally, and therefore I have trouble expressing direct emotions, emotional reactions sometimes. And it's not that I don't feel those things; I still feel those things, but it's a problem of how I tackle a topic, and understanding, like, trying to keep everything, like my personal life, balanced in a way that I can step back away from the persona of the analytical gentleman, and and um
Yeah, not lose a
be
sense of
myself.
self or a sense of, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's probably one of the the biggest challenges for me as a creator mentally. And sometimes I'm quite an ambitious person, and therefore if I don't feel like enough progress is happening, given my arbitrary scale of progress, then I'll start to feel a bit down and depressed. And so there's a load of things that can affect how I feel. And I think it's actually okay to show a bit of emotion in videos sometimes. It's just you want to reach that emotion. You want it to be a legitimized reaction, and you don't want people to think that you're trying to manipulate them.
Absolutely, but the irony
And I
being, though, the success of a lot of your content isn't the fact that you're clearly not detached because you have your own opinion on that,
Exactly.
on the person or on the subject matter, but you also, part of the reason that people, certainly myself including that, love to watch it is that it doesn't feel like the emotional, immediate emotional reactions of a bumbling 22-year-old. It's not just like, well, this is
Yeah,
what I think, this is why it sucks. It's like someone who's gone, okay, let me take this away, carefully consider all sides of this, and then
exactly.
lay out my thoughts in as eloquent a manner as I think I can.
Exactly. And to do that sometimes requires some restraint.
You
And
talked
I think
about
sometimes
oh, sorry. Let me
no, no,
please
you
finish your
go.
thought. No, finish your thought.
Oh
Sorry.
no, okay. It requires some restraint, and I think generally, like, my only concern is sometimes the restraint can become a bit too universal in general life, because I realize that my videos are probably like the best way for me personally to analyze situations too, in general.
So it's
And if
bleeding
it
from the content now into your personal life. Maybe you're applying that as a,
exactly,
yeah.
and sometimes I think you got to be careful, because although emotional reactions aren't always the most rational, it can also be a personally quite cathartic to be able to let it out over something. And then and then obviously it's important to be able to let it out in the right place, right time. There's a place and a time to be emotional, and it's important not to, it would be definitely important for me not to do that in my content.
This is
um
wonderfully meta that you're now explaining how important it is to not overanalyze and to have an immediate emotional reaction sometimes to things, to feel that emotion. And yet you are analyzing that would be a good thing to put into practice.
and that is
It's
my
like
problem, is
inception of
that
emotions.
sometimes the fact that I have said to myself, okay, try not to be too emotional in your reaction to this. It also means that sometimes when that's followed through into my real life, sometimes I just feel distant, and I don't feel the personal catharsis of letting out emotion that I know I still probably have.
It's
So
good. I understand what you're saying. It's so, in layman's terms, maybe for some of my viewers who might not be following completely, effectively, you're saying it pays to sometimes just have a good cry or have a little scream and a shout. Otherwise, if you bottle up your emotions too much and become too cold and analytical about every aspect of your life, you will go fucking mental.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an important thing. And for my content, no, I have no issue being mostly quite analytical. Though there are a couple of videos where I get quite emotional. But
Such as what?
I
Which
think
which
that's
which which videos would they be?
uh
Because
I'd say a lot of people recognize that at the end of my Etika video I got quite emotional. That was definitely a good very personal subject for me, and I did become quite emotional towards the end there. Um, but I think that was that a lot of people recognized the emotion as even at that stage to be quite a fair reaction, and to not be coming from a place that was attempting to negatively influence anyone. And so I know it was but it's important sometimes to be like human
Of
in your
course.
videos. And I think that's something that you said to me in conversation, that I definitely come across with a level of humanity, to a level of self-awareness, and I think that's really important for
Self-awareness is
an
key. I mean, as
audience.
I push towards 40 years of age, the thing that is becoming, and this is also, I mean, I talk very openly about these kind of things on my podcast, certainly, and in my stand-up comedy too, but or even in documentaries too. But the thing that I think is so important is the more self-aware you can become. Of course, it becomes dangerous if you're so self-aware you overanalyze everything you do. My reaction actually is completely polar opposite to yours. The more self-aware I become, the more emotionally connected I become to everything. So
Yeah.
small glances from people, as a stand-up comic, you learn to read the smallest
Oh.
nuances of reaction from people. And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
in my relationship, even with my girlfriend now, it says there's moments where I get very deeply sensitive and hurt and upset by things that really are not important, or were fleeting glances, or just a
Yeah.
smirk or something can make me go, what's behind that? I know that maybe I'm doing this thing, maybe it's me, maybe yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
actually go the
I
opposite
I
way.
completely get that. I used to be exactly like that. Um, and I guess I mean, I don't know exactly when the change occurred. It was probably quite a gradual process.
Right.
But for me, because I used to have this terrible anxiety, worst interpretation sort of thing, and like you would lay out like these possibilities, and you'd pick the worst one, think, oh
Of
god, what if?
course, yeah.
Yeah.
Always
Now
a
I've
cynic,
kind of
very much self-loathing.
yeah. Now I've kind of just taken a different approach. I line out all the options and say, well, that's probably the most rational explanation, so I'll go with that one. And if anything um else is the case, then I will deal with that accordingly.
What a wonderfully
So
mature way to do things.
yeah,
I'll let you know when I
so
get there. I'll let you know when I master that skill.
yeah, so it's one of those things. I was completely the same, no question about it. And although I'm definitely pleased to be past that stage, there was a certain bit of emotion to it that I you do miss. So it's generally, I think it's probably the best that
It's
I've
about balance, though, isn't it? Really, ultimately.
it's a change. But at the same time, you you have to stay invested in other people's sensitivities. But I'm very analytical of the world around me, and I pay close attention to even the slightest of things. Like yourself, I guess my own response to those things just comes to different conclusions. Um, and so I can't really, you know, blame you for being exactly the same position that I was for ages. Um,
I've definitely found duality of experience, and you're currently juggling, I guess, the duality of who James is as a person, who you want to be on your own personal journey as, a young man growing and changing, and manifesting the best parts of yourself, and maybe trying to conquer the worst parts, like any good human being should do. And then there's
mhm.
also the content creator who's quite, analytical and not cold, but certainly very much focused on facts and context, and
Yeah,
and 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 there's a duality there, and I've certainly experienced a duality, even just in the simplest terms of the difference between being, for instance, a TV host, or a TV presenter in England, you would say, and a TV host, or a live event host, versus being a stand-up comedian. I
yeah,
actually was kicked off a platform, off Twitch, for whom I used to host live events. I used to do lots of like Comic-Con events for them and TwitchCon, and had at least a mild level of status within the community for a while. And I was kicked off for a joke I made about another content creator on a platform on the platform on a live show. And I won't get into the ins and outs. It doesn't really matter what my personal history was with this person. Let's just leave it at that. I didn't like the person. They didn't like me, and you know, and they refused to come on a chat show because they heard I was going to be on it. So I made a joke about the kind of content they make, and it was quite damning. It was very, very damning at a very insensitive time. Anyway,
I understand.
But I ended up, because the community wants to present itself as a certain type of thing. Oh, we're all inclusive. The joke I made was not that bad, really. I mean, as a comedian, from a comedian point of view, it was incredibly fucking light banter. But it was blown up into a thing by this other creator because they were a YouTuber and a drama YouTuber. That seems to be the mainstay of her content. Yeah. And I had to go, well, I think I need to pick a lane here. And I think a lot of young content creators need to really, as much as I'm always encouraging younger creators or younger artists of any kind to explore as many different avenues of the art that you make, as many different facets and as many different ways that you can create that art. So if you love performing, go and perform music and theatre and tell jokes and, you know, see what really fits with you. And you might love more than one thing. There's another part of me that actually, upon reflection, would say, if you are going to do something and you start to garner actual success within that world, for instance, being a streamer and a TV host, you know, you can't make the kind of jokes you would make in a comedy club as a stand-up comedian on a late night show.
Yes.
And that's has absolutely been, you know, there's been, it's all good now, but there were moments of hiccups in one career because I was being the comedian when I had to be the BBC TV presenter, or being the late night rowdy stand-up comic rock and roll guy when I had to be someone on Twitch, which is, you know, full of neckbeards and white knights. You have to really kind of pick your lane, I think, sometimes. That's also something to remember, I guess, when you're creating any kind of content.
Yeah, I think you have to be very conscious of the audience that you are creating content for. And I say that to a lot of people too. That's one of the biggest points of advice I give. It's okay to try and work out what you need to do and try and work out how to cater your content to a certain audience. But at the same time, you have to know that there may be certain implicit rules for that sort of content and how marketable it is at a certain point. And you're exactly right. And we've seen that with plenty of other comedians too. The fact that, you know, you can transfer your skill set from one thing to the other, but you have to also adapt to an extent as well, or else you might end up in some controversy or unnecessary drama that frankly you don't want. I'm sure no one else really wants.
Oh well, these days it's ridiculous because it's not even about what your moral or ethical character might be, or the things that you have or haven't done, more specifically, over the course of your life. But it's more now you can get in trouble for telling a joke on a platform, and people, you know, and I'm not saying getting up and going, hey, here's my type 15 about why Hitler was correct. That's not not the kind of jokes I'm telling or thoughts I'm having. But you know, it's a very interesting time to be creating comedy, certainly. And there is a lot of comedy in the content that you make as well. Do you ever have to re-record? Well, actually, I wanted to ask a more specific question for your fans who will listen to this. How do you go about the process of, you know, without boring yourself, how do you go about that process of saying, right, this is how I'm going to pick the next subject matter, this is the amount of time I'm going to dedicate to it, this is the way that I record it, because you now have animators who seem to make all the visual elements of your content, and yours is very much the written and spoken word element, right? What's that creative process for you like? For the next video you're doing, how do you go about that?
Well, I tend to take it as it comes to an extent. So I'll pick a topic that interests me and I will see how much depth there is to it.
How much do you
And
pick based on what interests you versus, as you just mentioned, sometimes you have to create content for the audience. YouTubers
yeah,
create content for the YouTube community, and something like Bad Baby and Woah Vicky, those are two characters YouTube absolutely fucking loves. So it's a surefire hit if the content is good. Whereas making something about, I don't know, the I don't know, your favorite Roman Polanski piece, that's not necessarily going to garner the same number of views
yeah,
from.
yeah. For fair enough reason, um, I'd say that
Have you ever
for
made a
me,
video where you've gone, you know what, I did that because I knew this topic is fucking hot right now? And yes, I'm interested in it to some extent. I'm interested in finding something new about it. But if you ask me to talk at length about this person, I'd say, oh, fuck that person. But for
well, I
YouTube, you can.
think I don't think there's too many topics that I've taken that specific approach. Generally, I pick my topics based on what I am interested in.
Okay,
For example, there's obviously the very popular topic right now of Onision, and although I find him very interesting, I know that I could get a lot of views from a video on him. I also feel that given the depth of the topic, it's something that I'm going to have to pick a specific time to dedicate to it, and I want to keep my videos at a decent pace right now. And I know that Onision would take a slightly longer time, and I could probably do it and keep the schedule the same, but I'd also stress myself out a lot, and I don't really want to do that. I want to get everything completely right. And so when it comes to picking topics, generally the two things that I consider, it's a balance. I have to be interested in the topic,
hmm,
but also I have to think the audience will be interested in it too. I think there has to be some level of audience investment. And I don't think I've ever picked a topic solely on audience interest. I obviously take both of things into account, but I've never gone, well, actually, I hate this topic. I'm only doing it
sure.
because the audience, because I feel that you might get a bit haphazard at that stage
It's never become
if
that
you.
two-dimensional for you that you're going to start hating the things you're creating.
Exactly. So I have to be careful, and how I go about it at like that point is I line up like loads of research. I look up various stuff, and I compartmentalize it all, and I say, okay. Typically, I work with a script. I research and I script at this a similar time. I will maybe prepare a few things in advance, but typically I will try and go through it as these things are coming to me as I write them out because
So you do script out quite clearly as well. Would you effectively type up like a an essay to be read as spoken word?
yeah. However,
So that's quite
and
a
this
unique.
is
That's quite a
one.
unique approach. I think a lot of people just splurge out what they're thinking, and then go, "Fuck, I'll go through and edit this." you know, I'll go through.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think one of the things that I try and say to other people, I think it's one of the biggest issues for a lot of aspiring creators, is that they write these scripts out and they don't know how to read them out. And the difference with me and how I've always approached it is I write things out how I imagine myself saying them.
Hmm.
And therefore, when read it out, it comes out more naturally. It sounds more natural. It sounds smoother. It works better. It flows better. It doesn't sound robotic. It doesn't sound like I'm reading off a script.
Well, that's the
And
101 presentation and speech giving skills. If every best man in the country at some point will have to
yeah,
learn those skills.
and that's one of the biggest factors to me. I say to people, write it out as if you'd imagine how you'd say it. And I always say that every time. It's worked for me, and I do believe it works for a lot of people who script and read these things out because there are people who do this stuff. They script it, especially some of the well, a lot of the video essayists. And I can tell you, they keep their scripts much alike to the way that they would imagine themselves talking. Of course, there is some level of distinction to be made, and that's completely natural. But there is also a connection between the person and the persona,
Right.
and that is a necessity, and that's got to come through the script. You can't just write something down very matter of fact, very stoic, and have yourself expect to read it out because you've injected none of your personality into it. That's not possible. You have to inject your own personality into your own script. That is a necessity.
Well, it's just like a comedian finding their voice, their comedy voice, their comic voice, and I think,
It,
I think you've obviously already, you've already kind of achieved that certainly on your channel and certainly with the content you make. It's very, very identifiably you,
yeah,
or should I say, very identifiably the right opinion.
yeah,
I wondered, obviously, given your studies and the interest that you have, and also a lot
yeah,
of the earlier content that you made on your channel, which was very much more British and politics centric.
yeah.
Do you envisage a day where, I mean, I think you're at what, like maybe. Apologies if I'm getting the numbers a bit wrong. I don't really look at subscriber numbers, but I think you're at least like at 500,000, if not more. No, not 700,000.
I'm currently at 483,000. So,
Oh, there you go. Okay, so
um,
500,000, right? So I was
yeah,
pretty much there. So that's. By the way, also I know that you've certainly blown up over the last few months to the last year in a much bigger
yeah,
way. Do you
yeah,
envisage a day where you can turn around? Like, I've got a couple of buddies, like Matt Santoro, for instance. He's got, I don't know, 6-7 million. My buddy
yeah.
Swifter has about 3.5. Do you ever envisage a day when you go, I have now got myself, let's say, 2, 3, 4 million people who are pretty much locked into who I am, the way I speak, the way I write, the way I create. And would you ever hope that there's a point when you can say, I actually now don't even remotely have to pander, even in a small percentage, to what is
Mm.
popular right now? I could talk about British politics. I could talk about global politics and make that my mainstay, and people would. I could almost educate people on a subject matter they weren't immediately drawn to because they are drawn to my personality and they want to hear my way of speaking about that thing, even if it's something that wasn't initially of interest to them.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess in a way, I would hope that I would reach a stage where I would have more control over the topics that I choose. But at the same time, I like to be sensitive of my audience and what they enjoy. I feel that my content is always a mix of something established and something new. And I get a lot of comments already, particularly from recurring audience members that say, I didn't know about this topic at all, but you made it sound interesting.
Hmm.
And so I guess you have a point on that behalf. I'm not sure if there's ever a stage where I would feel completely comfortable doing that. There's definitely a stage where I'd want to take a few more risks.
Well, I mean, if you
With
want to be known for the pornographic content, you're gonna have to once you cap at 1 million at least. I think that's when you can drop the first home video.
of course. I will. That will obviously be an inevitability.
At least a
It's
Patreon.
just
It could be like a
uh,
Patreon kickback or something.
only fans or
There
something.
you
I think
go.
they allow porn easy. But yeah, I love making content that people enjoy. I enjoy that sort of positive energy that is part of the creator experience. So for me, I guess it's a balance. I would really love to have people say, "Oh wow, everyone say, "Oh, wow, I never knew about that." And there are definitely some more risks that I want to take in the future, guess topics that would be a bit more out of left
Give
field,
me
but
one topic in an ideal world, utopian
oh
situation.
gosh.
Your audience are all just going to go with it. What would be one thing? Because I'm looking forward to the day when I log on and see in my the subscriptions. I go, he did it. He did the video that he wanted to do. What would be one topic that you perhaps
Oh.
would love to, or is that putting you too much on the spot?
Well, no, I mean, it's not putting me on the spot, it's just it's hard to think of a topic right now that makes me go, "Oh, wow, eureka." It's difficult to think on the spot about a topic that really invigorates me. Obviously,
What happened to
uh,
Sooty? Really, what happened to Sooty?
I I mean, that's a good question.
There you go.
Um, uh, what happened to Teletubbies?
What happened to the
Another good.
Teletubbies? Where did they go?
Probably some crack house.
The right opinion,
Um,
asking the questions no one dares to ask.
I I want to really do some videos on game shows, but the thing is, I'm I'm already kind of working on like a side project that will do that, but
Okay.
just not on my main channel. So for me, there are definitely things that take and pique my interest, but I'm kind of starting to work on them already, just not on my main channel. I want to keep my main channel somewhat focused in the topics that it covers because
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me that's a necessary part of branding. Although, taking risks can also have great payoff, but I would definitely take more risks in the topics that I plan on doing in the future, though I can't see my format changing too much because I think the way I approach things is a necessity for the appeal that I provide.
Well, I see that
So,
obviously right now you're dropping, roughly, or it seems to be roughly a video every 2 weeks, and because of the
yeah.
amount of depth that those videos have, it's you almost do unfortunately limit yourself slightly on schedule on what you could do on other channels. But I do
Yeah.
think having a secondary channel or even a third where occasionally maybe only once every quarter you drop a video that really deeply interests you about politics and you have a political channel that could be
Well, yeah. I want to do political videos. That's one of the things that does interest me. The problem is that I have a format in my head for what I want to do with it, but the problem currently is that I have no way to create that currently.
okay.
And I was hoping I was going to move somewhere soon at some point, but everything's kind of been up in the air, and
Right.
therefore it's uncertain of when I'm going to have the opportunity to pursue
I
that.
love how
I
wonderfully
really wanna
vague
do
this
that.
all is. Is it?
It is vague. It's vague to me, though. That's the problem. I've been bugging my friends because the plan was that me and some friends who are currently living in London are gonna move to a new location,
Okay.
and,
Is
we're
that where
going
you're
to
from?
convene there. No. Uh, um, I'm actually from the Southwest, uh, Somerset.
Oh, what a
Which
lovely
sup which,
place.
yeah, lovely place. It surprised a lot of people because, I don't have the farmer's accent, but, that's I was raised in a
You had an education. That's what happened.
raised in one of the metropolitan areas, so,
There you go.
um, should
W-
ex but the thing is that we were gonna move there, and that was going to happen soonish, gonna happen at the turn of the year, and now I asked my friend about it, and he was like, "Oh, I'm not sure when it's gonna happen. I'm not sure I feel established enough." Even though, without without naming names, he's pretty established,
Right, sure.
and I would hope that he feels confident at some point to make that move because I think it would be beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, I think he should do
And
it because realistically, you can get rent pretty cheap in London if you go to the right place. Just go to Leytonstone. Move to Leytonstone. You'll get a goods. You get a good
oh,
2 or 3 bedroom house in Leytonstone. That'd
we
be all right.
we wouldn't even move to London. That's the thing. He's
Oh.
already in London, and the point would be he's moving away from London,
Oh.
and I'm in a different place, and we're both moving to the same place, or we're all moving to the same place to be together, not in the same house, but to the same area, so that we
So you can
can
create together and do things and help each other out with the process.
exactly.
I'm grossly aware of time. We're about to hit a 1 hour, which is I actually you're probably the one of the only guests. This is a wonderful moment of self-awareness. One of the only guests who I've done more listening than talking to, which is a testament to your intellect and eloquence. But I
Thank you. I'm very
also
flattered.
no worries. You brought the best out of me. I'm sure most of my listeners are going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? Normally he's talking about dick jokes and stuff. I wanted to ask you two very quick things before we do that. First of all, given the career, I'm sure you haven't done enough of a deep delve into my history to know much about me, but I can already see your voice working incredibly well on other platforms, most notably TV and radio. And I wondered if those are things that you've either thought about. Really, I'm sure you have, but have you put any plans into action, or is there currently any plans to do some of that? Because I think you'd be remiss if you didn't at least explore those avenues.
I think I should. I agree there. I definitely should. One of the things that currently is
Bubbling away.
on the table, I'm definitely going to look into radio and TV. I did actually, at one point, do an internship. I guess it was an internship. I mean, it wasn't really an internship. It was more trial runner to a radio, and the trial run must have been like 8 months. And then they didn't hire me, and
And
it
now
was
who's laughing, James? Now who's
that's true.
laughing?
I'm definitely laughing now.
I don't think you need to approach it in that way. I'll certainly, if you allow me to, at least impart some advice maybe after this podcast. I think if you could very rapidly take some of your format, certainly your voice and your style, and I think there'll be a number of different networks that would be interested in talking about creating something with you. Certainly.
Yeah. Well. That's. I mean, that's great to hear. And to be honest, yeah, it was. It was a difficult. I mean, it was that whole situation with the radio station was difficult because it was a really awkward time in my life. It got very dicey
Mm-hmm.
in many ways because a load of bad things happened at once, and it was like I think it just really knocked my mood for like a pivotal month in the trial, and it kind of just made me less outgoing, extroverted than I normally am, than
Right.
I normally would be on a
So you
radio show.
weren't presenting your best self necessarily.
Exactly, and so I I understood. I just wish they'd been a bit more empathetic towards the situations because they like it was just a run of bad things that happened, and I think anyone who at that stage I was very young, and I think they could have just said, okay, yeah, no, we understand. Would you like one more go, one more try? It would have been pleasant. So they sent me an email. They waited like I mean it was God knows it was 7 8 months. They waited to send me the email, and I responded fairly sternly to the email because I didn't appreciate how they had handled it in multiple ways. I understood their perspective to an extent, but they'd also messed up multiple things, and I think they were kind of insulting actually in how they communicated their feedback. So I'm known for my stern
I mean,
emails.
to be fair, you were trying to do the drive time show on One Extra, and I don't know how much you know about hip hop and dance music, but you didn't really fit the bill.
I would argue that I know a fair bit about hip hop and dance music.
Really?
Actually,
Let me hear you say Wagwan. Let me hear you say Wagwan. Come on.
Wagwan.
Oh, okay, all right. That was pretty good. A little clipped, but it's pretty.
I would. Well, I love music. Music is one of my deep passions, and I've got music knowledge across the board. It's one of
Well,
my
actually, in your first video on
strengths.
your channel, your introduction video, you do say, I'm going to be doing videos Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I thought, well, that's fucking, that's good luck. Which obviously, you've changed the format also based, I assume, on what YouTube's algorithms wants now. They want long format. But also, you said, eventually I feel like there will become a point where I can set up other channels to review music, to review other arts that I'm passionate about. So I'm excited for that to happen for you. I think that one day that will.
I would love to do that, and it's definitely always been an interest for me to explore. So
Absolutely.
I would love to do that, but I'd also love to pursue music, TV, and various.
You don't want to do that? No, I did that. You don't want to do that shit. I did a lot of music festivals and a lot of music shows. Don't do that shit. It's fucking boring and everyone's two-faced.
No, I don't want to do music festivals. Like, I didn't mean music TV as.
You don't mean like T4 or like or basically.
Yeah, no, I music, TV.
Okay, music and television. And look, listen. Here's a final question for you before we wrap it up and we tell everyone how they can check out all of your content.
Of course.
Obviously, an element of what you do is, whilst I'm going to use this term very loosely because I don't think you are nasty in the way that you approach your subject matters or the people who are your subjects of your videos. But there's a mild, especially when they need it, there's a mild character assassination of some of these people, based on context, facts, and taking all different views into account, at least with your account, whereas with some others it's more just, this guy's an ass. However, when the day comes that maybe you have released that porn video, perhaps a few skeletons fell out of your closet, maybe, it comes out that you were actually refused the job at the radio show and after the internship because you pulled your penis out in the middle of a staff meeting on a Wednesday. When that comes out, which YouTuber would you like to do a video on you? If someone had to take you down in the YouTube community, who do you think you would most like to do the takedown video of The Right Opinion?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you. I prepared that one.
Oh, yeah, that's a...
Yeah, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Because, there's a lot of people who do it. PewDiePie does them, H3 does them. Colossal, maybe.
I think Colossal would be quite poetically appropriate because he was the first real larger YouTuber that I met in the community.
Right. And also there's some crossover in terms of at least voice, and accent and delivery. Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable person to do it. And we knew each other ages ago. I knew him when I had must have been less than 100 subscribers. So we go significantly far back.
So you'd want it to be someone near and dear to you. So at least when you're crying and sobbing and rocking back and forth, you know that they did it with love.
Yeah. I'd know it would always come from the heart if it was Colossal.
There you go. And if he's busy, Rice Gum could do it.
Yeah, he could write a diss track.
See, I'd much rather an absolute moron do a takedown of me because that would be the easiest. What a gift that would be to be able to come back to say, okay, let me just deal with a couple of these things you brought up and let me point out how much of a hypocritical piece of shit you are and get into it.
That's reasonable, to be fair.
So Colossal would be first choice, and maybe...
I guess I love the pain.
There you go. And now we've learned a little bit more about you and potentially what is going to be in that pornographic video you eventually release. James, it was a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking some time out on a Sunday.
No problem at all.
Obviously, myself and anyone else who watches YouTube content regularly and loves watching commentaries and I see them as studies of human nature. A lot of your videos, actually, it's quite nice. Yeah. I actually I was watching your video about Woe Vicky and Bad Baby, and my girlfriend peered over and went, "What the fuck are you watching? Why are you watching stuff about these idiot girls?" And I said, well, first of all, Bad Baby has at least one good release. Gucci Flip Flop is a modern day classic. Secondly, I'm watching it because I'm part of this community, and these kind of characters they're the ridiculous, just like she's a musician, and what J-Lo's up to that week is of interest to you, what these YouTubers is of interest to me. But also I do very much see it as an certainly within your content, an exploration of humanity, the best, the worst, and all of those areas of grey in between of humanity and what humans are capable of doing to themselves and to other people. If people want to find that, obviously they're just going to go onto YouTube and they're going to search The Right Opinion, TRO, The Right Opinion. Now, if do you encourage people to follow you on social media, because it seems to be quite personal? You don't really have a huge amount of followers on your Instagram, for instance.
My Instagram's pretty quiet, but my Twitter's got 58,000. That's where I do a majority of my communication. So, my Instagram isn't too busy. I don't have too much going on there, but Twitter's pretty buzzing.
And if people want to find you on there, it's just at The Right Opinion, is it?
It is exactly that, at The Right Opinion.
So make sure you follow him on Twitter, at The Right Opinion. Make sure you find him on YouTube, The Right Opinion. Just search that. You'll find him. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. And hopefully maybe watch out for a few other projects, maybe even in the realm of TV, radio, and certainly music in the future as well. That'd be great to see those things happen for you. James, It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
I look forward to chatting to you again. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye.